For anyone who's new here, my name is Gwen. I work as a head of engineering / tech lead at a startup, so it's kind of a hybrid people and technical role. I've been in the software development space for over 7 years, and over the course of this time, I've developed many processes and found various apps and techniques that work for me to help me manage my day-to-day and maintain my productivity levels. So that's really what I want to share in this video. I'm going to go over 20 processes, apps, and tools that I use day to day. All of these I've broken down into 3 main categories. There's distraction mitigation, there's organization, so tools I use for organization, and there's also speed. So anything I use just to work a little bit faster. So I'm going to mention briefly what each tool or app is, and then I'm going to go into how I use it. Now, I just want to make it clear I am not sponsored by anything that I mentioned in this video, nor have I ever been sponsored by anything I've spoken about on this channel. Now, the goal of this video and productivity in general is really to be able to balance my life so that I can achieve my goals while maintaining some kind of balanced, healthy life. I'm going to cover everything that I talk about in this video briefly, but I do have plans to go into deeper dives on some of the individual topics that I mentioned. If you have any questions or you have anything to add, maybe you think I'm missing something, then I would love to hear about it. You can leave a comment below or join me on Discord, and you can find the link in the description of this video. The first category I want to go through is distraction mitigation. And I think the first step here is to do the most obvious thing, which is eliminate distractions by removing the source of the distraction. In other words, deleting distracting apps and turning off all extra or unnecessary notifications. I know for myself, when I get a notification, I can feel myself start to get stressed, especially when I'm trying to work or do something else. It just makes me feel really overwhelmed. One thing that I've done is I've deleted all apps that I find myself mindlessly scrolling through or constantly checking. That includes any type of social media off of my phone. Additionally, I heavily use the Do Not Disturb feature on my phone during the workday and really most of the time. I only have my notifications on for very small periods of time during the day. I like to check things when I want to check them and when I have scheduled time to check them usually. A lot of times I will check things when I'm taking a break or have time set aside on my calendar to check things like emails or notifications. Some of the tools that I use for distraction mitigation include Freedom, which helps me block websites and apps across all my devices. And I also use a browser plugin that works on a few different browsers. It's called LeechBlock. And I pretty much use LeechBlock for a few websites that I want to keep blocked all the time, unless I manually turn off the block to check them real quick. That way I don't mindlessly go to these websites. I like that I can create custom block lists and schedules, and these tools have really helped me from getting sidetracked while I'm working. Now, when I do have distracting thoughts, one thing that has really helped me is keeping a distraction journal. I basically keep this tiny notepad on my desk, and anytime I get a distracting thought, I write it down, and that gets it out of my head so I can continue working. It also helps me identify patterns in these distracting thoughts, and I can try to pinpoint the triggers that cause them, and then I can figure out how to stay more focused next time. Sometimes when I make a list of things to do in the day and I don't know exactly when they're going to get done or in what order, I feel myself start to multitask and switch back and forth between things, which is obviously very inefficient. So one thing I've done to try to mitigate that is use time blocking. So time blocking involves setting aside specific chunks of time for certain tasks or activities. This technique really helps me prioritize my work and stay on track. I also use a calendar app for this and block off pretty much the whole day every day with whatever I'm going to do, even for downtime. to try to prevent scope creep from work into the time that I want to relax. So I also block off my downtime. One thing I think a lot of people don't think of is I've noticed when I open my phone and I'm looking for an app, I think we all might have so many apps on our phones. I definitely do. And I can scroll past several different apps, and then I have some distracting thoughts, or I click into various apps and I don't actually get to the app that I initially opened my phone to look at in the first place. So I've realized that I've wasted quite a bit of time doing things like that, just scrolling through and looking at tons of different things before I actually get to the right app. So I've started using voice to open apps a lot of the times, and it basically prevents me from seeing any apps. It opens the app that I want right away, and I don't get distracted. This kind of goes along with voice. I use dictation quite a bit, so I use it to take notes, write emails, compose documents. I use it almost all the time when I'm texting. It's much more efficient than typing with my two thumbs into my phone. And I also have a voice recorder as well as an app on my watch and my phone. And then I feed all of those notes into my Obsidian, sort through them, and it's a very nice input flow, which helps me to be more efficient and also not lose ideas that come to mind in the moment. One app I really want to give a shout out to is something I started using called Speechify. Speechify is an incredible text-to-speech app that I love to use to help me catch up on reading and also pay attention when I'm reading. It can basically read any written content that I feed it. I think maybe there's some file types that it doesn't accept, but for the most part, I can feed it PDFs, articles, emails. It pops up automatically in my web browser when I'm on a blog or in my email client, and I can just press play and it starts reading to me. I can speed it up as fast as I want. Usually that's 2 to 2.5x for me. And it also speaks in a natural sounding voice. It doesn't sound like a robot like some of the other reading tools I've used in the past. I set reading goals for articles and books, and Speechify is really helping me to keep on track here. It just makes things so efficient and convenient for me, and it also helps because sometimes I have trouble reading or focusing on words, and I struggle with comprehension, so I really appreciate the team behind this tool. I also use it as a tool for bookmarking now. So I used to use things like Raindrop and Readwise, but I found that this works good for what I need it for. Just bookmark things, and then I can open my Speechify account and then use the reading assist to quickly go through all the articles I've bookmarked. Now I want to talk about planning and organization. Of course, I'm pretty good at doing yearly and then quarterly planning to align what I'm actually doing and focusing on with my end goals. I just usually do those on a grease board and store it in Obsidian to review later. Now for daily and weekly planning, I have several tools and methodologies that I use. This first one I've talked about quite a few times in my blog and maybe some past videos that I've done on this channel. I use the Getting Things Done method. It's a productivity method that is described by David Allen in the book Getting Things Done. It's basically designed to help people manage their tasks and commitments to reduce stress and increase productivity. It involves capturing all tasks and commitments in a trusted system. That could be a notepad or a digital task manager or whatever. And then you clarify each item by asking a series of questions to see if it's a task that you should do right away, or organize and prioritize it into categories or lists. It also gives you systems to reflect on progress regularly, and just generally helps by giving you a system of dumping everything out of your mind, giving you a way to organize them into buckets that make sense. Then you know what to focus on, and importantly, what action items to complete next. I've been using this system for about 5 years, and it's been working really well for me. The tool that I use for this mostly is called Nirvana HQ. It's a pretty good app that basically
does most of what I need it to do, and it's built for the getting things done productivity system, so it just works out of the box nicely. It has lots of standard features and it's cross-platform. The apps are pretty solid, so I really haven't had any issues that I can remember with them. The only things I wish is that it had a few more features. Like, I really miss having a calendar feature. It does have a date selector where I can say I want to do this task or finish this task by a certain date, but it doesn't really have a calendar view of everything. If you want to know more about this tool, I'll let you go to their site and watch the demo video, but I do use a calendar separately now. I recently got the calendar by, I think it's Riddle or Riddle maybe. I've been using their Calendar 5 app for a long time on my phone, and I just realized that they have a feature on their other calendar app, which is where I can have common tasks that I need to do regularly or action items like to-dos that I want to actually block off time on my calendar for. And the calendar app lets me just drag those from my favorites menu or tasks that I've added from my reminders app, which is just a pretty basic app for Macs. It's similar to using Todoist with some type of calendar. I know you can do drag and drop with Todoist as well. I just prefer this system because I was already using the reminders. It integrates really nicely with my calendar and all of my everyday and recurring tasks. So in the reminders app, I actually have groups of daily, weekly, and monthly recurring tasks. Everything from taking my vitamins to taking out the rubbish, checking the plants, all of those regular upkeep and maintenance tasks. I put them on a recurring basis in my reminders app, and then I have a widget on my phone, as well as notifications that help me remember to do the things that I really need to do. I want to finish this planning and organization section with talking about Obsidian. When I was younger, I used to have tons of analog notebooks and also digital notes everywhere, and it was just a mess of things that I would basically write down and never look at later or not be able to find when I really needed the information. Over the last maybe 8 or 10 years, I've slowly moved into only digital systems, and the one I've been using for I think a few years now is Obsidian. I basically put all of my notes in Obsidian. I could talk for hours about how I use Obsidian, but it basically has great folder organization, tag organization, linking between files, so many options for organizing things, and it saves a lot of time because everything is completely searchable. There are a ton of plugins in Obsidian. Some of them I use all of the time, like the ones for templates for different types of notes, and then the spaced repetition learning plugins that I'm using for language learning and also programming knowledge right now. I have various sources for capturing notes. As I mentioned before, sometimes I take audio notes, or sometimes I'll have to jot something down somewhere, like on a sticky note, but I try to put everything into an Obsidian note using one of the templates that I have set up, so that information won't be lost forever. I can always discover it again in the future by tagging it and linking it to other notes. I also create a daily note automatically using a plugin, and I have some automations where I automatically list all of the notes that I created this day and do a few other things. Another thing that I use Obsidian for is keeping a log. I think this is spoken about in books like The Pragmatic Programmer, about keeping a log of your day-to-day tasks and activities, so you can kind of search and scan through what you're doing. I find it super helpful to keep a log when I am task switching and I need to come back to that task later, or if I'm shutting down for the day. I like to write a log of what I'm currently working on, the current state, any thoughts that I have, and then I'm able to pick back up on that task or my work later. I've been doing that for a very long time, and that's been super helpful in my career. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Obsidian, but if you want to see my Obsidian setup, then maybe I can do another short video on that. For the tools that I use pretty much every day, I find it to be a really good time investment to learn how to use them effectively. Here are some tools that I use as part of development, and also some that just make my workflow on the computer better and faster. The first one I want to talk about is something that I found last year, which is called Rectangle Pro. Rectangle Pro is a tool for Windows management on Mac. And by Windows, I mean application Windows, not the operating system. It basically gives you drag and drop and hotkey features for moving windows around a screen and even moving windows across monitors, which I have found to be the most helpful. You can see I have this 4-monitor setup, and I can use one hotkey to throw the window around the screen in any position I want or move it to whichever monitor I want. I actually found this because a program I used to use called Spectacle wasn't being maintained anymore, and I was searching for alternatives. One frustration that I've always had on my Mac is that there aren't hotkeys to move windows across monitors, so when I'm plugged into multiple monitors, it's kind of annoying to have to drag things around every single time. But now with Rectangle, I don't have to do that anymore. They have a basic version, but it's just a one-time fee to upgrade, so I went ahead and did that because I wanted some of the Pro features. I know on Linux there are some good options for workspaces, but for Mac, I feel like this program is really a necessity for me at least. One tool that I've been using every day for years now is Alfred. It's a productivity application for macOS that allows you to launch applications, search for files and folders, perform web searches, and tons of other stuff, all from a Spotlight replacement search bar or from its interface. Some things that I use all the time are the clipboard history. You can set Alfred to keep track of everything you copy on your clipboard, so you can easily access recently copied items and then search for them and paste them again. You can set how many hours you would like it to save your history for, and also tell it to not store things like passwords that you copy, which you don't want stored in your history, even if it's only for a few hours. One of my favorite things that's very powerful is the workflows feature. I dive into this more in an in-depth video that I made a while back on Alfred. I basically create custom actions and then workflows based off of those actions. So if I hit a certain hotkey or I type in a certain keyword, then it can trigger apps to open, commands to run in my terminal, browser tabs to open. There are just so many options that it has. There's also a snippets feature where I create some of my own snippets. So for example, it's very easy to search for and paste my links to social media pages or templates that I want easy access to that I frequently use. And then sometimes I also use snippets that other people have made, like this emoji snippet, which gives me access to use emojis without having to look them up. There are other features like file search, system commands, custom themes, integration with other apps. Alfred is extremely powerful, and it does save me a lot of time and effort in streamlining common tasks that I need to do. As I mentioned, I did make that video quite a few years ago now, and I would like to make an updated one soon since Alfred has updated several times since then, and I also use more of the features now. Of course, I couldn't talk about speed and efficiency on a computer without mentioning one of my favorite tools, which is Vim Key bindings. It's not exactly a single tool, but I do use Vim Key bindings in as many programs as possible, as well as this browser plugin Vimium that I use in Chromium browsers, and they also have one for Firefox. Now Vim is a text editor that I use in the terminal, but its keyboard shortcuts are very powerful, so I use them across many different programs like VS Code and Obsidian, and I have a clean, nice Vim setup in my terminal as well. You can see what plugins I use in my dot files here in GitHub. Now using Vimium as a browser plugin brings the power of Vim into my browser, So I can use the regular Vim navigation like J and K to scroll up and down. I can use GG or capital G to scroll to the top or the bottom of the page. If I press F, you can see all these little yellow boxes with letters pop up all around the screen. And then I can type in those letters and it will click there for me. It makes navigation so easy without a mouse. I almost never have to use the mouse. I can also type in a / as long as I don't have an input selected, and I can use that for searching. There are other features as well, but those are the main ones. I love speeding videos up. Sometimes it's very hard to listen to someone. It sounds very slow to me now at 1x speed. Some sites like YouTube control the speed that you can play videos at. YouTube is okay, it gives you up to 2x speed, which isn't always bad. Sometimes I do want more than that. So I use this browser plugin called Video Speed Controller, and it lets me speed up any video in the browser. I found this incredibly useful for some things, like, for example, security training videos for work, because usually those kind of video editors in a closed system don't give you the option to speed up the video at all. But of course, a browser plugin does. You can even use it for websites like Netflix if you really want to speed up or get through something quickly, although that might be a poor viewing experience for the enjoyment of regular movies and TV shows. I usually speed up to between 2 and 3x. Even when I'm watching my own videos, I feel like I sound really good between 2 and 2.5x speed. Now I want to talk about hotkeys in general. Lots of programs, especially developer-focused ones, have great hotkey or keyboard shortcut support. Apps like iTerm, VS Code, all browsers, websites like GitHub, etc. Some things like having a programmable keyboard, like I use the Ergodox, that helps, but you can still have a very good hotkey game without a programmable keyboard. Any tool that I use regularly, I take some time to learn the keyboard shortcuts. For a while, I was writing down shortcuts and practicing them every single day. I would write a few down, practice them for maybe a few days or a week, and then write down another set of keyboard shortcuts. That made me a lot more efficient at navigating around my computer and just doing my day-to-day development work, especially tools like iTerm, my database client, and VS Code. I'm not going to talk too much about the exact keyboard shortcuts, but all of these programs have a list of their keyboard shortcuts that you can start looking through and figuring out which ones are most useful for you to learn. I want to briefly talk about password managers as well. If you aren't using one by now, you really should be, and I'm assuming most of you are. The one I really like is Bitwarden. It has lots of hotkeys, it's free to use as an individual, and it works across all my devices. You can create passwords and store any kind of secret information really, or just information you want to be able to retrieve later. It also makes it easy to share secret information to create a send link that can expire and you can send it to someone else without having to openly send something like a password in an unsecured chat. This is also very efficient for me because I use Bitwarden for automatically filling out forms. For example, in AWS, I need 3 fields. So I need my username and the password, but I also need the account number. So I use an extra field in Bitwarden, and then I can just press Command-Shift-L and it automatically fills in all that information, and then I just hit login. There are also hotkeys to do everything else, like generating and saving a password. Of course, no recent productivity video would be complete without talking about AI tools. The first time I guess I tried out a real AI tool was with GitHub's Copilot when it first came out. I tried it out for a little while, but then I ended up feeling like it just took more time to try to get it to work than it did actually writing the code. So I took maybe a year or so off, and then this year when ChatGPT came out, I decided to try out that and also go back to GitHub again. And honestly, I'm very impressed with how AI tools have improved over the last year or so. GitHub Copilot's AI-powered code completion is actually pretty good, especially for things like boilerplate or repetitive code when I'm setting up a project or creating new folders and files, or even needing to add an import. It's super helpful. It's pretty good at code completion too. So it's great for helping me to remember syntax quickly instead of having to look things up every single time. There are some caveats, of course. It doesn't take that long to get used to it though. You just need to include specific function names or perhaps arguments. You can even write out a comment in plain English about what you want. And then you hit enter and it tries to spit out the code that it thinks you want to write for you. Of course, it's not perfect and all of the suggestions need to be reviewed carefully. A lot of boilerplate stuff is very easy, but sometimes I've found, especially with ORM stuff and some more complicated code, it can make something look like it's working, but when you really dive into, for example, the raw SQL, you can find out there are some very dangerous and easy to miss issues with it. So it's a great tool to speed up development, but definitely needs human oversight still. And I found the same thing with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is great for giving me a starting point for writing documentation. If I need to write documentation or an outline for a meeting, I always ask ChatGPT for that. So I'm not starting at zero and then I just kind of make edits, and it makes it much faster to write and to plan for things. It's also pretty good at code, especially languages that are very common like Python and JavaScript. Again, you really need to know what you're looking at, and I really like that I can interact with it in various ways. If it doesn't give me the answer that I'm looking for, I try to re-explain the question again, and it has the additional context of the previous question, and then usually after a few tries it will give me what I'm looking for. So I'm very excited about the future of AI tools in software development, and I have a lot more to say about them, but I think I'll save that for another video. Those are all the primary topics of this video. There are a few others that I didn't mention for time's sake, like screenshots, video clips, regex and search filters, and how I track my time every so often, so I can kind of see if I'm spending my days in the best way possible. I do have some additional thoughts though. I think that all of the tools and processes that I mentioned can get you really far, but without managing stress, anxiety, and especially burnout, there's just no way to be efficient at work or really doing anything else. I've really learned that the number one way to improve productivity is actually taking care of my mental health. With a really hard burnout, productivity can go near zero. And then any kind of tooling or systems, processes, none of that matters anymore. So of course, above all, make sure that you check in with yourself and take all the time that you need away from the screen so that you can be more productive when you're actually doing development work. I know this might sound like a lot, but having all of these tools and systems helps me to be as productive as possible, to manage all my work and everything else that I want to get done in my life, while still having time to do other things that I want to do. Because if I have time to waste, I don't want it to be scrolling through my phone or staring at a screen. I probably want to be in a forest somewhere, going for a run, or just maybe spending time with family or friends. So I hope you like this video. These are all of my thoughts on productivity, a lot of the tools that I use. I know some of you have different operating systems, but I'm going to put a list of the tools in the description. And if you use different tools, then please post them in the comments. If you have any questions or comments or want to continue the discussion about productivity, I have a specific channel in my chat room dedicated to it. Thanks again for watching. I hope you all have a great week and take care of your mental health, and I will see you in the next video.